Okay, picture this. It's the autumn of 1223. There's a bitter northern wind blowing. The grass is brittle, and the ground is literally trembling under the weight of tens of thousands of horses. The undefeated Mongol vanguard, led by the absolute legendary generals Subutai and Jabei, is marching homeward. But what they don't know is they are walking straight into a devastating forest trap. Let's dive right into this explainer and see exactly how this went down. So the big question here is, how did a prosperous but relatively hidden Muslim trading state, the Volga Bulgars, pull off the unthinkable? I mean, they stood up against an army that had just steamrolled the Jin Empire in China, completely erased the Khwarezmian Empire from the map, crushed the Georgians, and annihilated the Rus armies. Literally no one had stopped the Mongols. It seemed like nobody even could, until this exact moment. To truly grasp the sheer magnitude of this totally unthinkable upset, we have to understand the unstoppable force that was marching toward the Samara Bend. If you look at their track record over the 15 years leading up to 123, it is nothing short of staggering. They were riding on an unbroken winning streak. By constantly rotating their horses, the Mongol light cavalry could cover up to 80 miles a day. Combining that insane speed with their composite bows, they genuinely seem like an apocalyptic force of nature that just couldn't be beaten. So, who were the people that finally managed to stop them? Let's take a look at the two rival military machines facing off here because the contrast is incredible. You have this drastic clash of completely different styles. On one side, the Mongol vanguard. They're built for speed on the open steppe, but right now, they're exhausted. They've been campaigning for years, their horses are lean, and the men are tired. On the other side, you have the Volga Bulgars, led by King Gabdullah Chelbir, alongside their local Mordvin allies led by chiefs Porish and Pergaz. These guys are heavy infantry. They are fresh, heavily armored, and they are fighting on highly defensible, very familiar home turf. Now, you might be picturing Volga Bulgaria as some rough, primitive frontier outpost. Actually, scratch that. We're talking about a sophisticated major economic powerhouse. Their capital city, Bilyar, was massive. Tens of thousands of people, complex defensive walls, grand mosques, the whole shebang. Plus, they controlled the lucrative global sable fur trade, which meant they had a massive commercial intelligence network stretching all the way from Baghdad to Novgorod. Their merchants had literally been tracking the Mongol approach for months. Because of that fantastic merchant intelligence, King Chelbir knew he had to neutralize the Mongol speed. It was time to set a massive geographic trap. King Chelbir was smart. He knew he had zero chance winning against Mongol cavalry out on the open steppe, so he makes this incredibly bold move. He completely evacuates his own southern borders. He removes all the grain, takes all the livestock, and deliberately starves the land. This effectively forced the hungry Mongol vanguard off the open plains and funneled them straight into a narrow, muddy, forested transition zone where horses just couldn't move. Imagine being a Mongol rider used to endless horizons, suddenly trapped in this vertical labyrinth of thick trees and deep mud. It was an absolute geographical nightmare for them. The legendary Mongol composite bow, it needs distance to be effective. Their sweeping, flanking maneuvers, completely useless here. The Bulgars didn't just fight the Mongol army, they weaponized the actual geometry of the earth against them. And right here is where it gets truly brilliant, because the Bulgars decide to turn the Mongols' absolute favorite tactic completely upside down. Talk about irony, right? The Bulgars actually use the feigned retreat against the masters of the feigned retreat. They send out a decoy force to engage briefly, and then totally fake a panicked retreat. This totally triggers the Mongol instinct to aggressively chase down a fleeing enemy. But as the confident Mongol vanguard stretches out into this long, thin column deep inside the forest corridor, snap! The Bulgar and Mordvin forces pour out from the tree lines, perfectly sealing off the flanks and the rear. In a matter of minutes, the hunters suddenly realize they've become the prey, and the vanguard is completely crushed. What followed was just a chaotic, one-sided slaughter. The invincible Mongols were totally packed together in this muddy column, completely unable to turn their horses around or even fire their arrows up at the hidden elevations. The 13th century historian Ibn al-Athir really hits the nail on the head, describing this absolute shock. It just goes to show, the Bulgars didn't pull this off through sheer brute force. They won this through a masterclass in terrain selection, geometry, and superior intelligence. To put the scale of this defeat into perspective, 4,000. Some historical estimates suggest only about 4,000 Mongol warriors actually made it out of that forest alive. It was an absolutely catastrophic tactical failure for Subutai's previously flawless reconnaissance mission. For the very first time, the undefeated general had to swallow a truly bitter loss. But what happens next really highlights the true genius of Subutai. He doesn't just react emotionally. He looks at the aftermath and the strategic lessons. Instead of blindly throwing his remaining men back into the meat grinder for immediate revenge, Subutai makes a highly rational choice. He orders a strategic retreat eastward, and then he spends the next 13 years coldly, calculatingly dissecting this defeat. He figures out exactly what went wrong. Never fight in dense forests again. Avoid choke points. Next time, he would need multiple, simultaneous columns and heavy siege equipment to smash those Bulgar walls. So, the Bulgars are forced into this grueling war of attrition on their borders for years. And then, in 1236, the inevitable happens. Batu Khan and Subutai return, and this time, they bring the full, overwhelming weight of the Mongol Empire with them. Having learned their lesson, they completely bypass the forest traps. They deploy captured Chinese and Persian engineers using flaming naphtha, and they literally burn the magnificent capital of Bilyar straight to the ground. But here is the most profound historical takeaway of this whole story. Yes, the physical state of Volga Bulgaria was totally erased in 1236. But the people? They absolutely refused to disappear. Refugees fled deeper into the northern forests. Their vibrant culture, their poetry, their Islamic faith, it all survived in the shadows. Over the decades, they actually ended up converting their Mongol conquerors from within. And that incredible culture lives on to this very day in the modern Tatar and Chuvash languages. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a kind of impossible historical dilemma to chew on. Put yourself in King Chilvir's shoes in 1224. You've won the battle, but you know the storm is inevitably coming back. Do you fight to the bitter end, or do you surrender to save your people? It's a tough one, right? But we really have to honor this forgotten civilization. They courageously proved to the world that even the most terrifying, invincible forces in human history have a weakness, if only you're smart enough to find it. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive.